Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2014 action film, John Wick. Now, John Wick is one of those films that really fell under the radar in 2014. It didn't have a lot of fanfare. I didn't really know that much about it, or even that it was even a film that was going to be released that year until pretty late in the game. So it's one of those films that I didn't really know that much about it, other than Keanu Reeves was going to be in it, and I was a fan of Keanu's. And once the trailer dropped and I saw it, I was blown away. I was like, this looks like a slick, stylish, and really entertaining action movie. I am all for this. And then I saw it in the theater, and it was a blast. And I really do agree with Jimmy G from Joe Blow, who says it's a wild and bloody ride. And it's a ride that, after it's over, you want to get back on it. You want to go on the John Wick ride all over again. This film holds up really well. I think it's a modern action classic. It's one of the best action films of the past few years. And definitely one of the best action movies of the 2010s. The entire trilogy is some of the best action that you will get from that particular decade. And one of the things that really stands out the most when it comes to John Wick is the direction by Chad Stahelski, who, prior to this, he was more known as a stuntman. He was actually Keanu's stuntman in The Matrix Reloaded, I believe. And he was also Brandon Lee's stuntman in The Crow. He's actually the one that puts on the makeup and everything and has that iconic shot when you have The Cure and their song Burn playing in the background. And he's the one that is doing all of that because Brandon had passed away. So they had to have somebody be a body double, and Chad was his stunt double for the film, so he came in and did that iconic sequence. And John Wick is a kind of film that you could see Brandon Lee doing, and that would have been really cool to have seen Brandon Lee do John Wick if he lived and was not taken away so soon. But Keanu Reeves is still absolutely spectacular in this role. But anyway, back to Stahelski's direction. Stahelski, he has a certain audacity when it comes to his filmmaking style with this film. And I love it. I love that he takes risks. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of shots in this that are very different than the norm. You have a lot of different shots that are from different angles, different perspectives, and they're intercut in a way that is very unorthodox. And in the hands of a less capable director, it could come across as try hard or one of those instances where it's just distracting. But that's not the case here. It really does enhance and emphasize a lot of the stronger aspects of the film. The action sequences pop even more because of the audacious direction, and the sequences that are shot in the nightclub, for instance, really do have a certain hook to them that grab you visually. And it's just one of those things where I feel that this direction is a match made in heaven for this subject material and to really showcase Keanu Reeves's talents. I mean, Keanu was born for this role because he completely became John Wick. This was not a guy playing a character. Keanu went all in. He spent days, months training and getting ready. He did 90% of his own stunts for this film. And not only that, he has a certain emotional connection to this character because he had dealt with tragedy in his own life with the sudden loss of his wife. So when you have scenes in this movie where Keanu, as John Wick, is breaking down emotionally when he's reading the card that came with the dog that his wife sent him, that's real emotion. That's not even really necessarily acting in that scene. That's Keanu really bringing his own real life experiences, his real life tragedies into the fold and creating a performance that is very believable and very real because it comes from a real place. And I think Chad, he was such a great choice for director because it seems like he knew when to allow Keanu to breathe and to be comfortable with displaying this kind of raw emotion. He just let Keanu roll with it. He didn't really force him to do anything. He didn't really try to push him to do that. Keanu just went out there and bared his soul in that moment, and Chad captured it beautifully. And speaking of beautiful, there's a lot of just really beautiful, gorgeous shots. The red circle, nightclub, the sequences that are flashbacks of John's life with his wife, the moments that are shot inside and outside the hotel. It's just a really slick, stylish, great looking movie. And a big reason for that is Chad's direction. And his stuntman background really did come in handy when it comes to the action sequences. It was so refreshing to see an action film from this era in this decade that was not shaky cam and quick cuts and all of this other bullshit that became so popular after the Jason Bourne movies. So it was really refreshing to see an old school kind of action movie that showed you the action in a fluid way and a more natural fashion. And in a lot of ways, it makes it better. It makes the punches hit harder. It makes the gunshots feel louder and feel like they have more of an impact. So it was such a breath of fresh air, and it also helps that it was just so brilliantly well done. The fluidity of these action sequences in this film and in this entire trilogy is astonishing. It really is. Just how fast things go and how furious things are and how wild things get. It's an absolute blast. It's so enjoyable to watch, and it's an adrenaline rush of unbelievable degrees. Like, it's such a crazy rush of adrenaline. And the cast is really solid. It's a really good cast. Keanu Reeves as John Wick, one of his best roles. You could maybe even argue it is his best role. Even above his role as Neo. And I really like his role as Neo in the Matrix films, and I like his stuff as Ted and Bill and Ted, and at least the first two films, and Speed. I'm a fan of Keanu's, but John Wick is on another level. This is a seasoned Keanu Reeves who is using years of experience as an actor, years of honing his craft to deliver a tour de force of terrific acting, and just emotion and intensity and just badassness. Like, he just exudes badass in this role. And it doesn't come across as if it's something that he's forcing or he's really struggling with. No, it comes across like, yeah, I am this badass. I am John Wick. And you know what? When you watch training videos of him preparing for this role, he is. He can do all this shit. Keanu Reeves actually is John Wick. He can go out and he can do all these uh, crazy things. He knows martial arts. He knows how to defend himself. He knows how to fire different kinds of guns and do it very effectively. So there's a certain commitment to this role that is far and above what you normally see a lot of actors bring to roles like this, and that's what makes this performance so special, is Keanu's commitment to it. And you also have some, I mean, Nyqvist as Vigo. I really liked this performance. It was stern, but it was also not too serious. He knew when to have fun with things. He knew how to play off of Keanu really well, and it was this contentious relationship between the two that ultimately wound up leading to a really explosive finale. But it's one of those things where you enjoy the scenes that they have together because it really does feel like there is a connection. And I like the fact that this actor was willing to inject some humor into the role. When Aurelio calls him and tells him why he attacked his son, and he tells him that he killed John Wick's dog and he stole his car, and he's just like, oh. That's just hilarious. That's so funny. Some great comedic timing there. And there are a few moments like that throughout the film with this performance. I will say this, the end fight between him and John Wick is not really the best because the two, they don't really feel like a match physically. So there was a lot of overcompensating from the writing and the directing to try to make it seem like it's an epic battle. The finale is still pretty explosive, but not in the way that it would have been if you had an actor who knew how to fight. But I'm okay with the direction that they took because the actor did such a great job playing this character that I can deal with it. But it is something that the film lacks, is a final fight that really is as epic as everything else that led up to it. But I'm willing to still give it a pass because of the fact that the casting choice was made because it was the best guy for the role, not because he was the best martial artist or something along those lines. Alfie Allen plays Isov Iosev, or I don't know how to say it, pronounce it correctly. I'm not Russian. My apologies. This punk ass kid who's the son of Vigo, who decides he's going to steal John Wick's car and kill his dog because he wants his car and he doesn't know who John Wick is. He did a good job playing a punk. Adrianne Palicki is Mrs. Perkins. She's one of the assassins that works for the same organization that John was working for. And she's a pretty foil. Like, she's not a really big part of the film, but the scenes that she's in, she holds her own really well. I liked her physical presence. I liked her personality. Bridget Moynahan plays Helen Wick, John's wife in flashbacks. Dean Winters, the protect yourself from mayhem insurance guy. Yeah, he plays Avi, Vigo's right hand. Ian McShane plays Winston, who is the owner of the Continental Hotel. It's a really great role for him. He's just relishing this role, and I love every scene that he's in. And it's so wonderful to see that in the other films in the trilogy, he's given more time and more scenes, because he definitely does deserve it. John Leguizamo, he has a bit role as Aurelio, the business owner of Aurelio's Garage, a chop shop. I'm a big fan of John Leguizamo, and I would have loved to have seen more scenes with him too, because he was great in this. He really did leave his mark on a very small scale because of the fact that he didn't have that many scenes. Willem Dafoe plays Marcus, an old friend of John's, who's tasked with trying to kill John, but then he decides to help him instead because they're friends, and that leads to a lot of trouble for him in the end. But Willem did a good job as well. He's another one of those actors who played a role that still left a considerable impact despite how small his scenes were in terms of the general perspective or the overall plot. And there's some other actors and actresses that you might recognize. David Patrick Kelly, he plays the cleaner. Lance Reddick plays the concierge at the Continental. Matt McComb, he plays a goon at the club, and he'd been in a lot of direct-to-video action movies. Speaking of direct-to-video action movies, Daniel Bernhardt, who took over for Van Damme in the Bloodsport film series, he's in this as the bodyguard or one of the main henchmen of Vigo. And I thought Daniel Bernhardt did a great job. Like, he had very few scenes, but he had a lot of physicality, and he really did know his stuff. I thought the fight scenes with him and Keanu were arguably the best fight scenes in the film because of his experience as a martial artist. And the screenplay by Derek Kolstad, it's simple, but it's very effective. You don't need to have too many bells and whistles. You don't need to have too many twists and turns to have a successful story. And John Wick is a prime example of that. So you have a story which is very simple, where you have this former hitman in John Wick who left the business because he fell in love with a woman named Helen, and he was given a way out by doing an impossible task, and he succeeded. So then he was granted that. He was granted an escape from this life of being an assassin. So he settles down, but then tragedy strikes, and his wife gets sick, and she dies, I believe, of cancer. So then he is now distraught, and he's really having a lot of questions in his life about whether or not to keep living, or really just struggling to find meaning. And this is exemplified in a lot of different sequences in a lot of different ways. One I really like is when he gets in his car and he's just driving around this I think it's like a runway, or some kind of I think it's like a construction site of some kind. And he's driving around, and he almost crashes his car into this heavy machinery that's acting as a barrier, because he was actually contemplating killing himself in that moment. It's a subtle thing, but it works. And he yells in frustration before he eventually stops the car because he realizes, I can't do this. And I like that. I thought that was a nice touch. And so what happens is he gets a gift from his late wife, which is this dog named Daisy, and it brings him new meaning to his life, and it provides hope. And then he gets a little bit of a verbal confrontation with this Russian scumbag, and his friend at a gas station, and then that turns into a situation where his old life comes back to haunt him. And the Russian punk comes over to his house late one night, beats the crap out of him, kills his dog, and steals his car. So they killed his hope. So as a result, he decides to get revenge. And so he goes to down to his basement and breaks through the floor and gets all his guns and rediscovers his past and goes out for revenge. And that's really all that the film is. It's a revenge story. It's a return to the life that he never really wanted to continue to live, but because of the fact that all hope was lost and the one last tie that he had to his wife that wasn't just memories was taken away from him, he decided that all bets were off and I'm going to kill them all. And I love how you have lines of dialogue with characters like Vigo that are holding Wick to this certain reverence. And also, I love how you show that they are genuinely scared of John Wick. Talking about how he's the boogeyman, that whole great line where Vigo is talking about that one time that he killed 3 people with a pencil. He once killed 3 people with a pencil. A fucking pencil! It really gives the Joker's pencil trick a run for its money, that's for sure. And I just love the myth of John Wick. It was really nice to see that brought into the narrative. Is the fact that he's this mythological figure of destruction. And then once you see him in action, you can definitely see why. Yeah, it's not a very complex plot. It's a In a lot of ways it harkens back to simple, effective action films of the past or just revenge movies. And I think that's actually a nice touch compared to so many action films of this era just cramming in so many different plots and subplots within subplots and twists and all this other shit. It's not needed. Sometimes you just need a wild ride with tons of gunplay and action and just enough intrigue and just enough characterization to make you care about what's going on and care about the characters, specifically the lead and what happens to him. And I feel the screenplay does a really good job making you care about John Wick and making you want him to succeed in his quest for revenge. And the villains, they're not the most memorable. I'm going to say that. That's one thing about the film that is a little lacking compared to other villains and other action films. These villains are pretty low on the totem pole, but they are written in a way where you dislike them enough that you still want to see them get their asses handed to them. But it's also not in a way where you dislike them to the point where you can't stand watching them. They're not that annoying or that obnoxious. Vigo, in particular, I think was handled quite well. So it makes up for the bratty nature of his son. And I like the fact that John Wick's not finding another love interest. Uh, I don't think that was really necessary. So I like the fact that he's still on his own and he's still dealing with a lot of emotions and I just love the scenes that really give Keanu a lot to work with in terms of the action and also when it comes to his acting muscles. He's flexing his action muscles here, but he's also flexing his acting muscles. The scene where Vigo confronts him and is essentially going to kill him because he took out one of his safe houses that had a ton of money and all this dirt on people in the city because he's trying to get his attention so he can give him his son. And you have that scene where John Wick is questioning whether or not he's back. And I just love how intense Keanu Reeves is in that scene where he's finally delivering the message that he's back. and the intensity that he provides there is just so amazing and so genuine. And it's a really fast-paced film. It's only like an hour and 30 something minutes with the end credits. The score is also really uh solid as well. I think the score is one of the better original scores that I've heard in an action film from this era. Specifically, the main theme by Tyler Bates and Joel J. Richard, that's incorporated in various different ways throughout the film. I also really like the sound mix and the sound editing and the sound design. Each gunshot really does have a lot of power to it, and so does the punches and the kicks and the necks getting broken. Um, and I like touches too with the sound, like how John Wick's alarm clock is inserted throughout the film to increase tension. I thought that was really cool. And I like other moments in the movie, like early on, where you're just being introduced to John and his life after his wife passed away and him just reeling after all of that. I love that there isn't really any music at all. It's very silent. There's nothing in the background. It's just allowing Keanu Reeves to display the emotion that's necessary, as well as the director. And I really like that touch. It's very different that a film would start out with just an alarm clock and then silence, and it's very fitting because it really does encapsulate what it's like to be in that moment. To After you've lost someone, it is like that. Everything is silent. Everything is very um, dull, and it's very rough around the edges. So I really like that touch. And speaking of rough around the edges, there's a certain grit to the film too that I really like, despite the fact that it's very slick and stylish in its design. And it has some really terrific other technical aspects like the cinematography by Jonathan Sala. I love the editing by Elizabeth Reynolds. This has some really excellent editing that's just sprinkled throughout, some really nice edits that just make the action sequences even more thrilling and makes the film visually even more stunning. And it really is a treat to see in 4K too. This is a really good transfer. But anyway, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about John Wick except it's a classic. I really do feel that this is a new modern action classic, at least new in the regards of an action film that's come out within the past decade or so. Um, and I do feel that this is one of those films, as well as the other films, that are going to be really beloved and are going to be enjoyed, and they are going to provide a lot of excitement and badass moments for a lot of people for years and years to come. Um, Fred Topel from Crave Online said cinema's next badass is here, and he was dead on with that. John Wick is a total badass, and this is a badass film made by badasses, and it's one of those movies that I could watch again and again and probably not get that much tired, not really get that tired of it. I don't really have that many things that I find wrong with it. It's a fast-paced, exciting action movie with some really kick-ass action sequences, some nice choreography and stunt work, and some really amazing gunplay, some unique blends of different things, like the Carfu in the end mixed with gunplay, something I really had never seen before until John Wick. And even though the final fight's a little disappointing, and I'm not a really big fan of how they use the subtitles in this. When somebody's speaking in Russian, I think they're trying a little too hard with the visuals and the way they're displaying the text. There really isn't anything that I really feel that is that problematic about the film. John Wick is one of those action films in the genre that is as close to perfect as you can get. There's only a couple things that I thought were lacking, and in the end they don't really affect the film that much in terms of my enjoyment of it. So yeah, I can't recommend this film enough if you haven't seen it, especially if you're a fan of action movies. If you have seen it, it's been a while. It's always a fun watch. And anyway, thank you for watching my review of John Wick. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.